Hello, everyone. I'm Terry Modishead. I'm the Executive Director of the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law. Really delighted to be here with you, and most particularly delighted to welcome Maya Markovic to the Centre's Legal Innovation series as well. Maya's a great friend of the Centre. It's always nice to have her back, and particularly talking about a topic that I know is very close to her heart. Leveraging the entrepreneurial mindset in your legal practice. We couldn't actually think of a better person in the world, literally, to speak about this than Maya. She's very much involved and right in the middle of this very topic day in and day out. She has been for a long time, but her focus particularly in this area now. So, as I say, really couldn't think of anyone better to invite to be here with us. So with all of that being said, I'm going to say welcome back, Maya, because, you know, we spend a bit of time together, you and the Centre and me. So it's just so wonderful to see you again. And I'm going to hand it over to you now.
So topics for discussion, right? So we're really going to get into how the entrepreneurial mindset is the embrace of persistent problem solving, ambiguity, and failure, looking at challenges as opportunities and with creativity and calculated risk taking. We're going to talk about why the legal industry has its own unique challenges and opportunities, why entrepreneurs are needed to solve critical challenges in the legal market, regulatory, access to justice crisis, consumer market gaps, some benefits of the entrepreneurial mindset, of which there are many, of course, and both a micro and macro level. We'll discuss what it takes to have this kind of mindset. It's a wide range of both business understanding and transferable skills or competencies. Some foundational literacies, the basic skills used to engage everyday tasks. Competencies, the skills that are needed to effectively engage complex tasks. And character qualities, the skills that are used when engaging changing environments, like curiosity, initiative, persistence, and adaptability. So all the way through, I encourage you to jump in, as Terry mentioned, with any questions, comments, disagreements, etc. So let's get started. So the classic understanding of an entrepreneur is someone who really sees a problem, no matter how big or how small, and believe they have a better solution. And then, a project or an initiative or a startup is born. Just one caveat before we start. I think having an entrepreneurial mindset is really quite different to being an entrepreneur. So the entrepreneurial mindset is perseverance plus impact, big picture thinking. The reality is, most startups, most initiatives fail, but it's those entrepreneurs who continue to see the world in a different way, believe that there's a better solution, and who are brave to go back. It's those people that have the mindset. So it's really about not being afraid of failure, expecting it, embracing it, and not giving up. It's being brave enough to see the world in a different way, consistently, and continually recognizing the core problem in a given situation, and then having the ability to find a solution that isn't constrained to social norms or biases or the status quo or any current expectations. So in this, you can already see, some of the themes in this diagram coming out, but there's a subtle yet important difference, right? So the cleanest and most inspiring, I think, articulation of this that I've come across is seeing the world not for how it is, but how it could be. I think that's missing something in a way, is that because I think an entrepreneurial mindset also requires a determination to create a change that you envision. And it really comes down to these three broad buckets: learning and impact and fearlessness. And the intersection between the three is really where that entrepreneurial mindset really lies. So for learning, a curious mindset that's continually looking for solutions to problems that are either not solved or which could be solved better at a lower cost, and being creative in that solution. Impact, I think, really comes down to seeking opportunity for the purpose of creating and capturing value. So a desire really to solve a problem in a different and better way. Most incumbents are sunk, by attackers that they never saw coming. So Uber, for instance, sank the taxi industry because it saw an infinite underutilized supply of vehicles and drivers that could be tapped. And the taxi industry saw constraining of supply as the answer. So it's really a growth mindset, a term that some of you may have heard of, contrasted with a fixed mindset. I'll dive a little bit deeper into that in a little bit, but you're creating, right? Solutions, products, clients, jobs. And then courage or fearlessness, having faith in your ability to execute what others haven't tried. There's a good quote by Steve Jobs, pretty well known on this one, where he said, when you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside that world and try not to bash into the walls too much. That can be a very limited life, and life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, which is that everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it and you can influence it. And once you learn that, you'll really never be the same again. So in general, it's really having the courage and the willingness to take big risks to accomplish the things that you believe are important. Some people think that being entrepreneurial is simply the same thing as being opportunistic. But I don't think so, because I think the difference to me is that simply being opportunistic doesn't really set you up to truly endure the challenges and setbacks that come along with being an entrepreneur. So the path is often long and hard. And folks with the entrepreneurial mindsets, by contrast, they enjoy the journey and the pursuit as much as the goal. So summing it up, it's a dedication to solving these hard, complex problems with creativity despite limited resources. And I know that that's probably all of those components are something that's familiar to us in the legal industry. As I mentioned a little bit ago, also, the entrepreneurial mindset is really a renaming of what is known also as the growth mindset, as opposed to this fixed mindset. So essentially, someone with a growth mindset expects to learn from every experience, accept failure as part of how they learn, listen to feedback from users, and be willing to bounce back, right? And try again. This is obviously quite different from the mindset that many lawyers have. So why is it so challenging? I think I'm probably preaching to the choir, but there are a number of reasons why legal is so hard to turn around. Number one, it's built for lawyers, not clients and consumers. The legal system as it currently exists today is essentially built for lawyers to run as a business. It's not user or client centric in any way. Another one I think we probably bump up against quite often is this feeling that a lawyer's work product is always bespoke and it cannot be automated in any way or repeatable. That is something that is a misconception that really people need to spend the time helping practitioners get over. Another one is this accelerating regulatory complexity, right? I mean, the rule of law is growing. So more markets need legal analysis. The risk is growing in terms of privacy and piracy and cyber threats, et cetera. And really, it's in many ways, it's still a 13th century guild, and legal hasn't changed much since the time of the Magna Carta. So the day-to-day reality of innovating within the legal profession really requires selling this guild on the benefits and mandates of the 21st century, and future-proofing a tradition-rich industry that's designed to stand on precedents is very difficult, and messy. I like it. I like being in that space, but it's definitely a unique space to be in. We're often told to find a problem that people have right now, and then try to solve it. But if you focus that way, you can really amplify the inefficiency of the current state of business. Worse, you're going to run into competition. So with this mindset, you can build something customers didn't know they wanted and build an enduring business into the future in the entrepreneurial mindset. The productivity paradox, of course, is worth mentioning. Because of the billable hour structure, eliminating work is a paradox that you really have to get over. If person one spends 4 hours doing a task and person two spends 2 hours doing a task, the GC likes the one who bills less, and the managing partner likes the one who bills more. So in each individual lawyer in these types of practices is put in the almost impossible position of advancing their career or advancing or pleasing and providing the best work possible for the client. I would say that I feel there are significant strides being made to change these issues, but we still have a ways to go. So, as we've seen in many lawyers' unwillingness to accept change in the form of, technology or a new regulatory framework to operate in, most lawyers have this fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. They want to be experts in who never get it wrong and whose clients will accept whatever cost and whichever way they decide to deliver their legal services. And that kind of thinking simply is just not going to solve the critical challenges that confront the legal profession. So tradition and precedent, right? Legal is an industry, as I mentioned, and as we all know, it's steeped in tradition, this pervasive, this is how we've always done it. And it's precedent based. And law school and law practice really doesn't train people on how to iterate, pivot, and redo, or try to ask, why do we do things this way? Could we make it better? It's not about change or about welcoming those who think differently or questioning the basics. So there's this enormous upfront investment time that's spent learning, how the world is, that's required to enter the legal market. And it's important during this time that folks also learn, as you all are doing, how to imagine the way things could be and develop the resolve to make improvements. Because lawyers are taught to this precedence, it becomes, this become ingrained in much of their thinking well beyond the law, and it can actually become a worldview. So, without entrepreneurs in the profession, lawyers might still be using yellow legal pads and typewriters. They definitely would still be using paper time slips, and manually filing court documents. One example I know of is a startup called Column. They discovered that lawyers were cutting and pasting newspaper clippings onto handwritten court documents simply because, that was the way it had always been done. The cool thing is they set about fixing that. And within a year, Column has become the official system for multiple states and growing. So risk aversion, this lay of the land, this centuries of tradition of precedent coupled with risk aversion is really can be a recipe for an innovation graveyard. Legal training results in this thinking that is particularly risk averse, which is truly antithetical to solving problems in new ways. So there's this push and pull that's constantly in every lawyer's day to day. So entrepreneurs are needed when products and services have moved away, for any reason, be it to, selfish motive, self-centered motive, or lazy structural thinking, moved away from the needs of the customer or the user. And when a great beneficial change is possible, but simultaneously very difficult to achieve due to some very powerful sort of status quo. So while the legal mindset, often teaches this risk aversion is just not going to find solutions to these new challenges. So we need to foster an entrepreneurial mindset. Changing the landscape, the legal industry is riddled with regulations and complexities, these unique challenges, rigidity, traditional mechanisms, et cetera. And the landscape is changing so quickly, and legal consumption is also changing. So when critical challenges can't be solved by existing means, you need to develop new approaches. In many geographies, 20th century laws are trying to be applied to solve 21st century problems. So the Revolution 4.0 or the tech revolution has really taken over the world with some exceptions, including the legal industry, where law and technology are on opposite ends of the spectrum. For a revolution to truly take over, I think, in the legal industry and make it equipped to solve these 21st century challenges, an entrepreneurial mindset is really the only way to get there. And right now, the legal market is buckling under its own inefficiencies and operating within this system that wasn't designed to handle current market challenges. I'd argue most importantly, also, we need people with an entrepreneurial mindset in the legal industry because current approaches don't work, as evidenced by most prominently, probably the legal services gap. The law is so complicated that you need to be a lawyer simply to know what your rights and obligations are. And the legal market is even more resistant and harder to change, as we know, than the world at large. And the result has many critical challenges have arisen as a result of the failure to change, particularly in this access to justice space. Policy and law moves much slower than the need for social change. So the entrepreneurial mindset drives innovation, and it can accelerate change by shaking up the status quo. So in summary, if you zoom out on this question of why we need it, I think we need this mindset because, we seldom get it right the first time. And the legal industry is not known to be open-minded. In fact, in many ways, it's outdated. It's not known for embracing change or technology to create efficiency. And in fact, its model is in many ways to encourage the very opposite. So the entrepreneurial mindset is about big picture thinking. And I think the legal market at the moment is really focused on the small solutions. This won't solve critical challenges, the things that actually matter. And so we need brave souls with big picture thinking to break through the barrier. So why is an entrepreneurial mindset a good thing to have? At its most basic level, I would say innovators win. In the legal industry, we're slowly headed toward new and better revenue models, like software SaaS over the billable hour. What this means to you on an individual level is that cultivating this mindset will make you a more employable, more successful legal professional, business owner, if you choose to do that, and engaged citizen. Speaking specifically about legal industry change, this mindset helps remove inefficiency from the profession. So legal professionals are very smart people. The more low-level tasks that can be automated enables them to leverage that intelligence to accomplish more, less drudgery and higher fulfillment. There are, and the more roles there are to choose from: legal ops, legal engineer, legal tech companies. These are all options that didn't exist 10 or even 5 years ago. So when we stop accepting things as unchangeable and start questioning underlying assumptions, we open up new possibilities for solution, new potential revenue streams, more happy clients who give you more work. And many also say, greater job satisfaction from approaching things differently and more strategically. You will continue to contribute substantively and be open to feedback. And once you, no longer feel like you need to defend and uphold the system, you'll be able to really be a force for positive change. A few broad themes here and how to develop it, because all of that can sound really overwhelming. There are, kind of a few buckets that it falls into. I would say the first one is endurance. So it's like being an athlete, training to develop strength or endurance. The more you train and the smarter you train, the better you're going to be. So to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, you should kind of resist the TV and couch potato way of doing things that have always been done, in favor of getting out onto the track, identifying, testing, and then proving the solving of problems better and cheaper. Failure and adversity. Seek out hard things to do. Put yourself outside your comfort zone and be challenged. Don't assume you know all the answers, because you definitely don't. Seeking out diverse perspectives. Working with completely different people and appreciating their way of thinking and solving a problem. Diversity is so powerful, and in my view, it's truly still underestimated as a component for success. Really, I would say on this one, take advantage of these diverse mindsets and be ready to learn most things, in the moment. Recognize that talent can come in many shapes, genders, races, languages. Don't work with people that look like you because they see things in the same way. Truly, the talent and contributions of those who are different from you, and supporting them and making sure that you're bringing those folks to the table as key stakeholders, will ultimately always makes for a better end goal. And lastly, I think that's really all about an open mind. In order to identify better and more efficient ways to deliver legal services, you have to approach the profession with an open mind. So that's why this entrepreneurial or growth mindset is sometimes referred to as a beginner's mindset. It's important to be able to shed all preconceived notions, about how lawyers have operated for hundreds of years, in order to think clearly about what value lawyers are bringing to their clients, how they can provide value to the 80% of people who need lawyers but are not getting access to them. How to create new business models for the practice of law and teach those skills to those that are coming up. I think once someone knows the differences between these kinds of mindsets, it's important to also be able to recognize them in yourself as well as others. So one example that I like to give is that I always say and think, I can't draw. I'm not a good artist. Because I've believed that since kindergarten, I avoid situations where it's incumbent to draw something. So, for example, I avoid playing Pictionary or anything that requires sketching. It never occurred to me that I could just get better by practicing or getting some instruction. That's a classic fixed mindset. The other theme I think is needed here is belief, right? So a deep and unrelenting belief that something can be done better by doing it differently, and a sincere commitment to solve this problem that many people have. A lot of people can see the problems, the inefficiencies, but they don't go the extra step to envision and test potential solutions of them. So, a wide range of both business understanding and transferable skills or competencies. What does it take to develop? It really falls into three categories, and this is actually something that I worked with CLI Innovation Officers Forum on, and there's a really great report. I suggest checking it out on the CLI website that came out of the work we did, kind of dividing these up. So there's sort of three components, right? Foundational literacies, those are really the basic skills that are used to engage everyday tasks, and competencies, which are the skills that are needed to effectively engage complex tasks, and character qualities. These are the traits that are most successfully leveraged when you're changing an environment. So in foundational literacies, some may be more or less applicable to your situation, but at a high level, lawyers with these skills are those who are going to keep and win clients and business in this new dynamic that we find ourselves in. It's important to be able to understand and speak, at least as a quote unquote second language, an understanding of law, of course, basics of data science, money management, databases, and embracing technology to more fully leverage our human superpowers, but bearing in mind to get attached to solving the problem, not getting attached to the product itself. Understanding iterative development approaches and the lean methodology is especially important for lawyers who might be tempted to solve all problems at once. So learning to develop minimum viable products in whatever form they might come, which can be improved after getting feedback, is key. Then I would also add a basic understanding of project management, process design, design thinking. I can't really stress that one enough. And of course, strong organizational and execution skills. For competencies, I think the skills, these, tasks like skills like critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, collaboration, EQ, and cultural competency. I would add to that as well risk appetite. So willingness to take a risk is always the first step. Listening skills, having the ability to listen to an opinion and understand that point of view. You may not agree with it, but you can try to understand it without passing judgment, and then listen to and incorporate that feedback and criticism. Also, a nimble and flexible mind, be able to brainstorm wildly and be wrong often. And flexibility, understanding and appreciating that in life there are ups and downs, and that can take many forms. Then lastly, I would say on character qualities, these are the skills that are used when you're engaging in changing environments. There are many, there's dozens of these. This isn't a laundry list of all, but see how many you can recognize in yourself or others. Things like resilience, the ability to roll with the punches as they happen and have a high stress tolerance. Adaptable, embracing failure as the natural part of the process and an opportunity to learn and grow. Agility, the ability to pivot based on failures, successes, new information. Creative problem solving that always really starts with this very unedited, non-judgmental ideation where there are no bad ideas. A drive and proactivity to find creative ways to solve these challenges with the resources you have before policy and infrastructure catches up is key. I would say also curiosity, always seeking new information and questioning the status quo. Tenacity, resilience, and grit really required to stay the course. Adaptability plus perseverance. There was a study done on what characteristics are the biggest determinants of future success, and they found it wasn't, money or intelligence or even partners. It was this persistence plus adaptability. So those are important, but they develop naturally, when you love what you're working on. Comfort with ambiguity, embracing ambiguity, and being able to thrive with uncertainty. Critical thinking, which I think is also better kind of described as acuity, what is really happening. A build mentality, a bias to action, and optimism. Changing, creating something new is possible, and we can make it happen. I see really these taken together as a starting framework for successful future lawyering, ultimately combining mindset, skill set, and tool set. And I see a lot of overlap with the framework for human-centered design. Obviously, the things I mentioned are clearly not exhaustive. They're not in any particular order, but good food for thought. So good news. There are a lot of traits you already have. And for the ones you don't have yet, they can be learned. They're not innate. When you approach challenges with a growth mindset, you understand that abilities also can be developed. So this list and areas of overlap, which I personally find totally fascinating, comes from one of the Next Law portfolio companies, Hire and Esquire. So it's an online legal hiring platform combining 2% of the US attorney population, or perhaps even more by now, and these proprietary psychometrics that instantly recommends the best contract attorneys based on the likelihood to succeed in a particular role, in a particular work environment. So it's really like Moneyball for on-demand legal hiring. The company did 3 years of research into traits and found that some lawyer roles really require this entrepreneurial mindset. And they drilled down specifically into what that means from a placement perspective. So lawyers traditionally are lower in some of these entrepreneurial skills than the general population, while they're stronger in other areas. As an individual, it's really easier to distinguish yourself within the firm or the organization and to clients by having these skills, since they are rarer here. And for the industry as a whole, it brings this much needed skill set and different perspective to the table. There needs to be more diversity of traits and competencies in the legal industry. So again, here, the key is self-awareness, understanding your existing mindsets, filters, biases that you that can contribute to and detract from any kind of entrepreneurial mindset. So next, then you have to understand the elements of the mindset and the competencies that flow from them, right? What do you already possess? What do you need to work on? And seek out resources to grow and learn and develop the mindset. The traits that correlate to success in entrepreneurship, with all things being equal, like other traits and competencies are fixed. Although note that these traits do not correlate to overall success in entrepreneurship. Actually, the most determinative factor of your success as an actual business entrepreneur today is the socioeconomic class that you were born into. Still, you can adjust for your weaknesses. Being aware of where you're weak and researching how to adapt specifically is probably the best advice. And I would recommend taking a validated scientific psychometric test to help with this. So for all of these things, self-awareness and being open to where you need to improve and willing to work at it is key. As for opportunity, your timing couldn't be better. Before I talk about this, though, I just want to mention one thing to do after our time together is sit down and talk through some challenges that you have, that you've noticed, with the ability to see problems as opportunities and solve for these problems through active experimentation and collaboration. So with respect to the legal industry, of course, it's undergoing significant disruption. From in 2015, when we founded Next Law Labs, there were 75 self-described legal tech companies, and now there are close to 3,000. Large and growing market, general understanding is increasing of the opportunity. It's attracting institutional capital, private equity, different modes of delivery with ALSPs, and new law companies. Private equity, people's minds are opening to the possibilities. So there's so much room for growth and creative solutions to tough problems. Also, I would point out that timing is great because you can stand out more easily. There are still, hard to believe if you're a member of CLI, but there are relatively few people attacking legal problems from this perspective. And so, that said, because the baseline is so risk averse and the industry is so steeped in tradition, as we mentioned earlier on, it can make it more difficult to try new ways of delivering legal services for clients. But if you approach the business of law with a growth mindset in just one or two areas and start there, you're really going to create opportunities for the people that choose to pursue them. And more importantly, the impact that you're able to have as a single person thinking innovatively about client service is just astonishing. There's no shortage of problems that could be solved better and cheaper. Everything from these big systemic problems of the complexity of lawmaking bodies and the complex and fragmented ways that law is made, to the ways it can't be easily followed or enforced, the sheer masses of it, regulation and contract law and case law, all the way down to these very granular questions that come up day after day and hour after hour in frustrating ways in lawyer workflows. As I mentioned, we're almost at the end here, but as I mentioned at the outset of the presentation, in compiling this content, I spoke with entrepreneurs with whom I've spent a lot of time already, largely legal tech startup founders. Speak to them almost every day to learn more about the space, what lawyers need now, where the industry is heading. And they usually have one thing in common. They're either lawyers themselves who are frustrated by a situation they felt just had to have a better, easier way to approach, or they're from a sector that has a very unique legal need. For example, the financial services or real estate industries are just a couple of the types of specialized legal tech hotspots that we're seeing. It definitely helps if an entrepreneur has a deep knowledge of the industry or field whose problems you're trying to solve. But what many of the startups I work with have in common with these entrepreneurial leaders is this a legal background of some kind, a strong entrepreneurial streak, and a desire to drive innovation at a large scale and help evolve the industry in meaningful ways and give people more opportunities to love practicing law. On the question of technology, I think, there's no debate that technology is changing the fundamental way in which law is practiced. But being concerned that robots are going to take our jobs away is really not the way that we see things headed. Person plus machine is better than either one on its own. And most other industries are way ahead of ours in this regard, where it can actually lead to more professionally satisfying practice than some of this turn the crank work that's defined so much day to day of legal work. I know, actually, I feel like that's probably a topic for an entirely separate session. However, so in closing, just bringing it back to entrepreneurship overall, I'm optimistic if the industry adapts. So rather than being solely risk averse, we can have legal tech, and different processes can help lawyers be innovation partners with their clients. This is something clients are demanding more and more. So approaching tasks with this entrepreneurial mindset, even traditional tasks, like so much of what we do, is a really good way to start moving the needle. So I encourage you to please engage further, agree, disagree, enhance, add to the lists, and the future of legal is in your hands. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maya. Another brilliant presentation, I have to say. I'm kind of getting used to them. So the bar keeps kind of being raised, I have to say. Folks, throw your questions into the Q&A bubbles, but while you're kind of thinking of those, I've got some that I really do want to ask you and pick up actually a couple of threads there, if I may. You spoke about almost the collaborative or increasingly collaborative relationship with clients in terms of developing solutions. And I know that that's something that you've worked a lot on. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit more about that, both as a trend, but also the benefits of doing that. We often think about it in terms of legal tech, but increasingly, obviously, it's much broader than that.
Yeah, I mean, in short, clients are demanding more and more collaborative working relationships with their counsel. I think that they are realizing that the way that they themselves are being held to, I mean, and speaking in business law context,
Sure, sure.
um, they're being held to increasing standards to provide value internally in their own organizations, and they are realizing that that their counsel can help them with that if they are like-minded. And a lot of that comes down to lawyers, their lawyers knowing their business, knowing their sector, providing them with insights that they themselves didn't have time to find, or connecting the dots in ways that that they're not able to do if they're just kind of in their own zone all the time. What they're looking for are ways to do all of those kinds of things more easily. So of course, collaboration platforms are booming right now because email is not necessarily conducive to doing that. But a platform where you're sharing documents and being able to pay the bills in a client portal and ask questions and find and providing the self-service aspect of things at higher scale, and understanding on the outside counsel side that actually may lead to a short-term dip in P&L, but ultimately is a much stronger, deeper relationship, which will drive more work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that relationship also being one of the big things now as well. Well, always has been. I wanted to pick up on just the legal tech connection to entrepreneurship and pick up one of the questions that we have here as well. And that's really, how or to what extent legal tech is enabling, I guess, innovation and entrepreneurship. So the question is, based on your experience, does technology drive innovation in the legal industry, or are there other areas that are pushing for change? And coupled with that, would love to hear some innovations you've seen recently.
Yeah, this is an excellent question, and I think I don't have a definitive answer. I would say that my inclination is to say that technology is not driving innovation. I think that it necessarily in the legal industry. I think what is driving innovation is an increasing understanding and new way of looking at the work that's always been done. And in fact, I mean, the most successful innovation comes from identifying the problem first. Obviously. And also the most successful legal tech is going to be that which addresses a problem that actually exists. And not a problem in search, not a solution in search of a problem. I think that there are a lot of other ways where people are pushing for change. I mean, I think tech is the enabler to innovation in many ways, but not always. Everyone always talks about people and process as well. I think that those are incredibly important things to keep sight of. New roles. Law firms need to hire project managers. They need to hire, people who are doing different kinds of roles than they've ever done before, and they may or may not be billable. But ultimately, again, in the long run, which is something very difficult for the legal industry in general to think in any way past a 12-month period. But in the long run, those lead to more work and a more robust business of law. I would say also another thing I would add is content. I think content is also something that people are realizing needs to be organized in a better way, more accessible, and more self-service. So I think that there are the people that are pushing for change, but I think there are several different vehicles by which they can be delivered. And it really ultimately comes down to the culture and the environment that they're being considered for deployment in.
Why do you think also that folks, because I know I do this myself, that we're not any longer comparing legal services to other legal services? We're kind of looking at it and thinking, gee, what other services can I get on my my mobile phone while I'm sitting on my sofa, supposed to be watching TV or paying attention to something else. But I can get all of these services. I can access them. I can do them that conveniently. Do you think that's been a change as well, that legal is now being compared with all of those other industries out there?
Oh yeah, I definitely would agree with that, because I think that it's becoming more consumer focused at long last. And I think that's because consumers of the legal services are starting to realize, why wouldn't I be able to pay something online, pay my bill online? Why wouldn't I be able to access my outside counsel through a client portal? I mean, there was just a report that came out with from Clio about how, if with merely having and advertising, or letting it be known that you have an online payment portal, created like a 15% jump
Wow.
in revenue per lawyer
Yeah.
in the last year.
Yeah.
And so not only do you have to have it, but you have to make sure everyone knows that you have it.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
that small caveat. You have to make it very obvious. And same thing with the client portal.
Yeah.
So I think that the numbers are there, but you still have to get over this inertia, and I think that some firms are really going that direction,
Yeah.
and some solo practitioners are going in that direction, actually seeing huge numbers of the small to mid-size firms doing really great things in this level, because they can be more nimble, perhaps. I'm not really sure. And at the same time, you know, there are firms that are just ignoring it. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be long before we start seeing casualties of the latter approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it influences my choice, as a former kind of practicing lawyer, but now a purchaser of legal services.
Right.
It really impacts my choice. That convenience factor, access, responsiveness really impacts my choice. I wanted to ask you another question, and just kind of, I guess, drawing back into this fixed versus open mindset. And I guess, there's a lot of folks that are probably online now and will listen to this later, that are in not necessarily a terribly traditional law firm, but has a lot of traditional traits to it. So the folks that are leading the firm, might have done things the same way for 20 or 30 years. There's folks that want to and think about it very differently. What's your advice about how those folks who want to have the entrepreneurial mindset and want to encourage that, and make it happen within those firms, what can they do? And I guess the other part of that question is, can they actually do it? Or is the only response go and leave and go and find somewhere that you can work where that's alive and well? Because I think
Yeah,
that's a really big question for a lot of people.
I know. And having felt that pain myself, I do always hesitate to sound like, it's easy. Just change your entire mindset and works in workspace. So actually, and I actually just recently did a presentation on kind of personalizing innovation, which I would be more than happy to
Oh,
share
we'll
with
have to
you
get you
another
back.
time.
Yeah.
um, but I mean, it's a good point. Where do you really start, right? Everything comes down to change, which is what innovation is. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen without change. It's the output of change. So it really starts with the people.
Yeah.
So whether it's the person driving innovation and finding it in themselves to change something, but they do, but they haven't optimized, or leverage something they're good at and they know could be used, or you're looking at how the work is being done, are you doing the right work at the right time? Are services, to the client being delivered by the right people? There are a lot of these big changes that are starting to be asked, and also these client demands are changing, right?
Yeah.
So when you really think about it, people really is the first place to start, I think. So each person can think of how they're working in their day job, but also other people, how are they being leveraged? Of course, process, it's all about the how. All of our jobs are very process driven. This screams opportunity to me.
Yeah.
So one of the first things an innovator will do is look at existing processes and figure out what isn't working, what's slowing us down, what's broken. What do I have to do repeatedly because something's not working upstream? So I would just encourage, just to take one example, right? So here's a real example. Work is assigned to us. A client sends an email, or internally someone hands you a task. What do? You do something, right? You reply back, you ask someone internal for insight. whatever it is, you're following these steps, you may not even be realizing it. So I would recommend just picking one thing and then breaking down those steps on a piece of paper. That immediately will shed light on what you can improve on. And, you can do this in various gradations. You can do something that you personally are the only one that does. And so you have complete control over it. Or you can, it could be like if you wanted to go a little bigger, what's a team thing? Make it fun, get together, map it out and figure out, a new approach, or write up an FAQ and make it fun and interesting to read and be creative about that. There's so much happening that it's hard to keep up. And so you just have to, think about what you possibly, you have to map, figure one thing out, map the process. It can be anything. It can be your commute in the morning. And then from there, kind of, and this can take forever, but can also take, a few minutes. And then think about it. What are you optimizing? And then, you make one change, boom, that's an innovation right there. That's an improvement that probably, if you extrapolate the effect of it to the amount of times you're doing it, is as a big magnitude. And that kind of thinking really snowballs.
Yeah. And I guess there's, as you're saying, there's a bit of a show and tell element to it, isn't it? You can upskill yourself and then do something and then show others and they like it and then they kind of jump on board. I know it's kind of simplistic, but I mean, things often flourish from those little beginnings, don't they? Yeah. So I wanted to ask you one more question, if I may. So the folks that are with us for this are probably thinking, well, am I an entrepreneur or am I not an entrepreneur? So what are the kind of psychometric tests that you referred to earlier that we could self-take and have a look at and just kind of, see, do we have those traits and competencies or capabilities that you were speaking of? And not to say you can't develop them, but what could we go to kind of get our baseline? What are the psychometric tests you would point us in the direction of?
Well, I'd be happy to provide a longer list than just what I can think of off the top of my head. Of
course.
One that I actually took recently was, I believe it was Mosaic.
Okay.
And I can't remember the full name of it, but the output of it was incredibly enlightening, and it really did kind of categorize things. And it's not unique, it is unique in many ways, but there are lots of different versions of it, of this kind of test. And the key is finding one where it breaks things down into buckets of accessibility in terms of, figuring out what you're already good at, figuring out what's approachable to learn, and then figuring out perhaps what things would be better to find someone to come and join you on your team that has complementary skill set. Yeah. And again, bring that diversity of thought and skills to the table.
Yeah. So just so important, and really appreciate you mentioning that as well. So I just kind of think that I need to take more of these tests to see whether or not I fall into the right category. So, I'm always open to trying them. So it's always a good thing. Maya, just absolutely delighted. And I've absolutely no doubt that we'll have you back if you will spare the time for us, because we so enjoy every presentation that you do for us, and just love drawing on your extensive experience as well. So thank you very much for being with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for attending live. We know that folks will pick this up afterwards as well. I also know that Maya is more than happy to chat with you afterwards if you would like to. So you'll find her on LinkedIn, if not in a billion other places, but you'll definitely find her on LinkedIn. So if you'd like to continue the conversation, of course, we'd love you to do that. If you would like to know more about the series, you'll find it on the CLI website, but of course, just generally in relation to a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing, please do follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter if you would like to receive this stuff in real time. So again, with that having been said, Maya, absolute delight. Again, thank you everyone for attending. And we really look forward to seeing you back, Maya, with us and all of you next time as well. Thanks very much, everyone. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.